Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.
That's right. Welcome to Whoa, Dad, Go, Dad. My name's Dave Momper. I'm your host. This is a fatherhood podcast for new dads and soon-to-be dads. I'm a new dad myself, and I'm asking every day, great dads, what does it take? What does it truly take to take on the ultimate role? All right, let's get to it. Michael Collins, I cannot believe my eyes. Welcome to Whoa, Dad, Go, Dad.
Thank you, Dave. Great to be here, man. Really appreciate it.
You know, I always wish we record the warm-up conversation before these because it's so rich. And what I loved about kind of just getting things moving together is how did we meet? Where did we meet? When did we meet? Why? And we actually dug it up. We found an email from someone who introduced us back. Did we say 2017? Was it?
Well, 2013, I think.
2013. Yeah, that's right. 2013. Why did I mix that up? 2013, Ashley Cloud just by chance thought we should connect. And I think what might be worth the listeners knowing is Michael and I both were in a similar position in our career development where we were going, all right, I have this idea of something and I know what I kind of want it to look like. The outcome is fairly clear. I can kind of see it, touch it, taste it, but how to do it, like the methods, the exact ways, the path.
Right.
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 And, funny enough, we both took a bunch of different, paths since then, and we should get into some of those, but we've ended up in a really similar position where you do a lot of storytelling coaching by way of your company, your consulting firm, which I want to get it right. Story-driven coaching is the name of your endeavor. And you're really a presentation coach, a speaking coach, right? Anybody who needs to convey a particular message to a specific audience and do it with, I'm making some assumptions here, but it's like with confidence, right? With conviction, with clarity to achieve productive results, business results. You're not just telling stories to, make friends. You're telling stories to get work done. You're supporting those types of endeavors for people on a lot of different scales. So we're both doing that work now, adamantly, with conviction every day. And I just love that we've ended up in a similar spot. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. And I must say, when I first saw Whoa, Dad, Go, Dad, with you putting this wonderful podcast out, I was like, that is so Dave. That is so on brand. That because you're just this, you're very curious and passionate, and I think care about people so much and want to help improve people's mindset, lives, all of that. And so I was like, of course he's put this podcast out, and I hadn't seen anything like it, and I said, what a great concept. And so I was just thrilled to see you putting this out there, and I think it's a great resource. It's really been fun watching.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's there's a little bit of work to it. As you know, you're a podcast host as well. So there's definitely work associated with this, but it's more of a passion and frankly, a value add to me to receive all this wisdom and all these stories and to listen to my fellow fathers who might be a few years or a few decades ahead of me in the experience. It's kind of like, why wouldn't I be doing this? Right. And I just want to recognize, to have you on with your background is kind of interesting. I want to maybe play with a couple key themes, but you lived in LA at one point. You were in the TV space. You're a trained improv expert, and you employ and leverage improv in a lot of the work you do. And in what you actually teach people to do is be ready for anything, be light on your toes, and, the yes and mentality of adding to each other rather than cutting each other down at the knees or just stiff arming each other's ideas. Is like, how do we build? So there's some beautiful things in there. And you were a TV host in steamboat, showcasing some outdoor lifestyle stuff. And that's just led you
That's
to this
right.
place where you were everywhere you looked, you saw the common thread of story and message. And that led you to where you're at today. But I just want to maybe hear a little bit about what stands out about the paths you've been on and the people you've worked with and the projects that you've orchestrated that is so valuable for the role of fatherhood. Maybe I can just see
Mhm.
story and fatherhood implicitly being connected, but what have you seen formally when you think of those two things? Story, fatherhood.
Well, I mean, what you said, yes, and that is absolutely key um, for fatherhood. I think going into a situation with how something should go or an expectation getting hung up on that, um, and then inevitably having it go a different way, um, being able to embrace that and not again not getting hung up on what should have happened or where you thought something would go, and that's really improv. It's like the keys of improv being um, it's ensemble. It's not just about you. It is about supporting the other people on stage. Like you said, yes, and if someone brings out an idea, you support that idea. Um, and I'm not going to say it's not challenging because in the fatherhood role, you do need to set the boundaries and you do need to, this is dangerous or this is not acceptable or, it's really tricky to have everything be yes and, but can you be creative in how you do it? I think is really where it helps. Can you think about other solutions or other ideas like my kid's not eating. How do we make this experience? How do we get my kid to eat? So I remember something just popped in my mind where my son was like, between 2 and 3 years old. He's just, putting something on a little car, like a little nugget or something, and rolling the car to him. It's really gamifying. I mean, if you can just gamify whatever it is, that is very helpful because you just get instant engagement. Um, but yeah, improv really taught me how to think creatively, think in there's not just one way. There's many different ways you can get to this outcome. So that's really where it benefits.
I love this. It's impending for me, right? Leo, my son, is a little over a year old, probably at the 13-month mark here. And there's going to come a time where I need to I need to persuade him to act and think and deploy his energy in certain ways and to quit doing that and start doing that.
Mm.
And there's nothing about his mindset that is practical and logical and reasoned, and he will only be motivated by play more than anything. I guess consequence, I would suspect, but even that, it's like, how
Sure.
do you really comprehend consequence as a little one? Maybe, and physical consequences obviously limited, if not completely faux pas these days. You're not like spanking your kid or whatever.
Right.
So it's like what's the real art of persuasion as a father in the early days, if not play, if not yes anding everything, like, oh, you don't want to eat that chicken nugget, but you know, shifting to what if you ate that chicken nugget after this choo choo train drove it up to you, like just to augment things through play to
Yep.
effectively get your kiddo to
It's and
proceed.
exactly. And sometimes you're tired, and so coming up with a game for every single thing can just be a little exhausting, but it does work, and it is you can do do you want this one or this one where they have they're given a choice, but it's really, you're either one of these is going to be fine with you or y- you know doing what's called like just switch track, you just get off one thing and go to another thing. You can't, I think, where what you realize quickly is trying to be logical or rational with a kid, l- um, until they're like 6, 7, 8 years old. is not a very effective way to go. It's you they're still in their fantasy brain. They are just nothing is really gonna make that rational sense. So that game, it's just a whoa, what's happening now? Something new is happening. Sometimes we would just, I mean, I've just, and it's still effective. I have a almost 11-year-old and a 5-year-old, and just picking them up and just going outside with them, just completely new environment. Oh, what's going on over here? Creating that that curiosity about something, getting their mind to move, to jump from being um, really obsessed about one thing to like curious about another thing. But again, yeah, that like the improv really helps with that, in just helping you be creative and imaginative in the moment. And even when you're exhausted, it doesn't have to be elaborate. Just a little thing.
Well, I feel like it's a key skill in a way as a father to almost decompress what can be. It could get annoying. It can be frustrating. It's if you're not patient and you're like, why isn't this kiddo listening? So to infuse or to draw on, hopefully, our inner improv artist as fathers, especially younger fathers, meaning not our age as fathers, but the age of our kids up until that 6 or 7 mark. So I've got a good amount of time that I need to be able to be an improv minded dad. So imagine, you know, there's a lot of young dads out there, and I would imagine this doesn't stop being useful beyond 6 and 7, by the way. But Mike, give me a little bit of context of where you studied improv, and then, what are the key facets of this improv approach that we can use as, I would say, as professionals, since anybody here listening has probably got an important job they want to succeed in, but also as fathers specifically, if you could kind of drill it down into the three things that make up
Mhm.
improv based on
Right, yeah.
what you've learned over the years.
So I actually started studying improv in Chicago at a place called Improv Olympic, which became IO because I think the actual Olympics had a problem with them using the word Olympic, even though this was comedy. I don't think it's ever going to be an Olympic sport, but for some reason they had to change it to IO. Um, and then there was another uh, pretty famous theater in Chicago called Second City, and I studied that was more sketch comedy, and so that's more writing. But they're both ensemble based art forms. One's written, one's just made up on the spot. You get a suggestion from the audience. But just like how they're and this might be a good way to put it. Improv isn't just like you just go out and everybody's just kind of doing whatever. It's you're playing the game within a certain structure. So there's structure involved. You can't um like there's short form and long form improv. Short form improv being more game style, like jumping genre. Now I'm going to sing the song as a Western, now hip hop, now, you know, top 40. That shows my
Sure.
range of musical genres.
Sure.
But you're essentially taking a concept and you're putting it into different environments. And what makes improv interesting is that um, playing around with context, like, maybe your business partner is having a conversation about a juice store you're trying to start, but you're in a gas station and the gas station's getting robbed, and so there's all this action going on, and yet you're having this conversation about what the name of the juice company should be named. And so there's putting things in different settings is always interesting and fun when you're doing improv. Yes, and as we've talked about, supporting the ideas that are already out there. Um, and then there is uh so that's that support that's going on. And then there is just not being attached to the outcome. because the scene is going to go where it's going to go. And if you get attached to an outcome, you're going to be trying to push it there. And that's going to take away from being listening, really listening to your scene partner and taking the gifts. We call them gifts, like um, if they, you know, whether it's a suggestion of a scene or what your scene partner just said as far as key information, you need to take that information and build on it. So that active listening piece is essential. If you're not listening to your scene partner, then you're not building the scene together. You're kind of pushing your agenda. So I think that listening piece is really important too. So the yes and not being attached to outcomes and that listening is really important. But again, you're playing these games, whether it's long form or short form improv, in a structure. And so that's kind of those are your rails, that's your bumper, and you're playing within this within these boundaries, if you will. So it's not like um with your kid, it's just, you're doing things that are unsafe or like negligent, like, yeah, well, it's an all-nighter again. So the structure of the scene is like your bedtime is still 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever it is, right? That's the structure of the scene. Let's get you there in a fun way, and maybe not the way I thought, but like, these things need to happen. Like, brush your teeth, get in your jammies, and whatever else. Those are elements that need to happen, but they can happen in any way, in any order, and just being open to that kind of um, listening to your kid or watching your kid and kind of experiencing and tuning in, I think is important.
Well, I was appreciating that distinction that you don't need to be outcome oriented, yet you do. Well, you're indifferent to the outcome, you said. So maybe
Yeah.
clarify for me, because it's
Yeah.
like I appreciated this notion of I want to be detached from the outcome because that allows me to be present in the moment. But I
Right.
still want to be intentional to achieve a certain goal or outcome
Sure. Yeah.
overall, and
Good.
within realistic uh, constraints or structure, or or like an actual container of something. So I
I
suppose,
guess, yeah, that's a good point, Dave. I think, because and thank you for calling that out, because because there is like not being attached to the outcome in an improv scene. You could end up in a barn or you could end up on the moon. Um, as far as parenting goes, I think, if the bedtime is still 7:30, that's the outcome we need to meet. But it's like not being attached to the way we get there, maybe.
mm,
Um, you know, like and that's where you really have to like, some kids, they do they do thrive with a little bit more structure. Um, but I think what I would say then is, um, the rigidity that you might have at some in some ways, where it's like, is being rigid here going to serve me? Is it going to be helpful to my kid? Can I flex here and there with it? Can I can I be can I be a little more in tune and listen and just kind of meet my kid where they are, at you know in these situations. Um I think that you hear about kids needing boundaries and routine, and that kind of can equal safety and security for them. But really, just like in an improv scene where you're checking in with your scene partner, it's like really tuning into what's the energy of my kid? What are they giving off? What are they saying? And just kind of meeting them where they are, and then guiding the scene from there. If that's going to require um a little more effort, a little more gamification of some things, then you might implement that. So it's really like, um, you know, every kid is different, and but but the need for security and stability is kind of a universal thing, I think.
well said. And I'm sensing the exercise of improv. If you were hosting an improv workshop, the outcome of an exercise isn't important. It was how you conducted yourself, how you behaved, how you yes-anded and built on and, danced with your scene partner. But with parenting, maybe there is something about the outcome is the objective, but you're improvising your methodologies. And I wonder if that's like, I touch on these three domains so often in communications and leadership training, where's the real misalignment or the need to create um, clarity and comprehension? Is it at the level of purpose, method, or outcome? And exploring those, or perhaps, and maybe that's this in kind of the professional setting is, can you be improvised, or can you improvise at the level of purpose, method, or outcome? Where's the actual uh, where if we were to invite each other to leverage improv, let's be clear about at what level, so that we're not actually creating more of a problem or just being
Right.
wasteful with our time. Let's like use
Right.
improv tactically in a way, right?
Sure.
Do we need to improvise at the level of outcomes and goals? Are we clear on that, or is that the problem? Should we actually get audacious with the goals and the things we're seeking to achieve, or is that locked
Yeah.
in and we should actually improvise at the level of methodology, or all three? So
Mhm. Well, no, that's
now,
interesting, Dave. Yeah, that's very cool, context to put it in, and I think, purpose is that is, I think, recognizing, where you are too. I was mentioning active listening and tuning in with your kid, and it's like recognizing where you are in this dynamic as well. If you're depleted, if you have energy, like, um, and uh obviously, I know you're not talking about purpose in that way, but I think it's just as important to, like, check in with yourself and where you are. That's something that, because I mean, in my 20s and 30s and probably 40s, I mean, I would just burn myself out, I wouldn't know how to take breaks or when to take breaks. It was just like, do as much as possible, as long as possible, and then what and this is not that doesn't serve you that doesn't serve you when you've got kids. I mean, you have to take care of yourself. You have to have the energy to be part of this dynamic and give, because it's a high maintenance situation. I mean, you're giving a lot of yourself, and it does take energy. And if you even want to call, like, improv, the land of make believe, just creating fun little settings and scenarios as you're moving towards those objectives. Um, but but for me, it was really like checking in with yourself too. Like, how am I doing? How am I feeling? Am I doing the things that I need to be doing for myself to be effective in this dynamic?
right, because if you're taxed, it's probably, like, oh, I need to play the yes and game, but that's just like the stupidest idea in the world when it's the end of the day and you're toast. You've had enough, and yet you're not getting what you need out of your kiddo. I can imagine that just being almost annoying, unless you're
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, I'm taxed, and yet I want to still be graceful and intentional and loving with my kid. What can I draw upon?
Right.
Perhaps it's improv. And I just want to acknowledge, like, what if we think of our little kids as our scene partners every day in every moment? I just think that's such a neat idea that you threw out there. Maybe not explicitly, but as you said it, I was like, holy cow, every moment of life is effectively a scene. And the Leo is my scene partner these days. And so is my,
Hmm.
my wife, Mackenzie. And it just shifted everything to think of things as a scene. For one, it's temporary,
Right.
and there will be other scenes that need my attention, my dedication for me to tend to. And so it's temporary. And yet it's an ensemble of a couple characters. Of course, you can have a scene with just one character in it, but in this case, I have scene partners. And what's it going to take for this to be a good scene? It could still be an ugly scene, but what will it take for me to make this a good scene And is improv perhaps one of the tools in my toolkit?
Well, and absolutely, I love the way you're putting that, and it is like a scene partner because it is all about dynamic. What's the dynamic of this? And, we have a choice on how we're gonna show up, and, that's just kinda learning about yourself a lot as a dad, and, um, but most improv scenes and sketch scenes, there is conflict. As an audience member, and I'm not saying, like, create conflict on purpose, but there's usually conflict in any kind of improv scene or sketch scene or movie, TV, whatever you see, because it's interesting to watch as an observer. But, there you're gonna have your kid wanting to do something, and it's time to go home, or, um,
Mm,
you've had enough crackers or whatever it is. And so then there's the conflict that's happening.
that's
You
funny.
know, there's one person that wants one thing and the other person wants the other thing. You have that conflict. So how are you going to resolve that conflict? Um, in improv, it could be like, uh, uh, you know, we were coached to like notice what's going to trigger your scene partner. And because the audience enjoys watching your scene partner be uncomfortable or be miserable, now you know what to go back to hit them again and hit them again and hit them again, and then we laugh every time that that person gets affected. Whe Whereas,
Oh, that's huge.
in parenting, it's like the opposite of that. You wanna recognize, okay, what is what is creating the conflict, and, and then what's that conflict resolution? How can
Mm,
we then, um, come to an agreement or come to an understanding, or, I mean, honestly, it's like sometimes it's just there are no more crackers and you're going to be upset about it. And let's find something else to get your attention. Or, like, in an improv setting, it could be like the cracker, the cracker fairy is they went to sleep. They're so exhausted from making so many crackers that they gotta get some rest now so they can make more crackers for you tomorrow. And it's just that when they're in their fantasy brain still, I mean, just making up those stories, and then that usually will work, if you can get some kind of buy-in in that kind of fantastical way.
I'm giggling at the idea that parenthood early on is literally conflict management 24/7. Like, maybe like 5% of the time, it's just, you're just cuddling with your little one. Otherwise, it's conflict management, possibly, through, uh, through improv, And I love that,
Yeah.
yeah, you can use improv to diffuse conflict, or you could use improv to almost play with or dance with conflict, and that's actually interesting in a way.
Well,
And so you
that's a great point, Dave. My 10, soon to be 11-year-old boy, it's getting more fun to play with him in that way, where it's like, you can kind of have this healthy teasing and healthy bouncing off each other. Like, he'll kind of give me some grief and I can give him some grief. And, like, I don't, Gus, who were you talking to when I picked you up over there? Anything I should know about? And it's so you like having starting to have some fun with your kid as Gus is getting a little older is pretty fun. Mm. We can talk about things in a little different way. He's able to um kind of understand and grasp more sophisticated concepts, um and so you can start going to these places where you couldn't before, and that's pretty fun. But it's really like, so there's some kind of fun teasing that can go on back and forth, but it's like at the end of the day, um, so important that you've built that trust where you can do that, and you can validate their feelings. You want them to be able to come to you with things, with concerns, with questions, um, so building that trust is a really, really big deal, and then validating, always validating what they're feeling, um, because it's a trip to think about how they're experiencing everything for the first time and how extreme that must be. Like, we've experienced the same things over and over and over. I mean, most things over and over and over again. There's always new things, but most things over and over and over again. So when it happens to oh, don't worry about that. That you know, that you're gonna get bad grades, or you're gonna get, you know, not, you're gonna have a rough day on, playing a sport or something like that. And just kind of talking about in a way that almost is like, "Oh, you don't need to worry about that." But it's happening for the first time in a lot of ways, and it's so the impact is greater. It's like Margot, she's in this kindergarten program, and she's coming home with this, "We have more taste buds than or our taste buds are more sensitive." It's like, "That's interesting," It's like tastes are more intense to the kids. 'Cause they either have more taste buds or their taste buds are more sensitive, so everything is more intense, and, it's really sometimes you have to really remind yourself to slow down your reaction to something and not dismiss it, or as, it's not no big deal, to really listen and try to think about things through their eyes a little bit, you know?
It just brings
It's wild.
that's the scene partner, uh, framing of it all just helps me so much because in improv with a scene partner, you have to tend to their perspectives. You have to take their perspectives.
Yeah.
You have to agree with them, but you have to appreciate them as a component or a factor of the interaction. And then you can't really dismiss them and maintain a productive or playful exchange or artful exchange. If you dismiss them, the whole game falls apart. That's kind of neat because I
Right,
think that's what
right.
you actually, and then you are in this interesting dynamic now. And we touched on this leading up to hit and record where you're tending to a scene partner who is on the brink of logic, rationale with your 11-year-old. Like he's left his imaginative world behind, or at least exclusively living in that world. He's probably got a foot in both worlds now. And hopefully he never loses half of that, by the way, because I feel like that's like
Right.
that we get duped as adults to leave our imagination behind because
Totally.
to grow up means that we're serious all the time. We realize reality is hard and all those things are true, but it's like if you can actually keep your imagination in your back pocket, it's going to serve you incredibly well, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully he's still got some of both, but you're just now reconciling the difference of how you show up for your 5-year-old and your 11-year-old. So what is the difference? How are you experiencing it so far and
It's really
lately?
Yeah, it's really wild. Margot, the 5-year-old, she's very perceptive, and she sees the family dynamic, and she wants to be included. She wants to feel like she's an important part of it. Um, and she'll see Gus bringing homework home or working on an art project and doing it at a level of like, wow, that's amazing. Like everything's very impressive to Margot about Gus and about the level he's functioning on. And so she will do different things to try to get attention, whether it's like taking something of his and, so she gets attention, and that annoys Gus, and Gus will go after her like, "Give me that. That's mine." And he'll kind of go from an 11-year-old to a younger age as he's interacting with her, kinda you see him kinda going down to her level, and then and to try to pull Gus aside and say, "Listen, here's where Margot is, you know, here's where her brain is development wise. She she doesn't, you might think that she's doing this to be mean or malicious, but it's really she wants your attention. She looks up to you. She wants your attention. And I see his brain trying to get it and go with me, but he's still super annoyed and irritated
Mhm.
by what she's doing. And, it's really, I do try to, when I see him being, the 11-year-old that is really taking her under his wing in a really great big brother way, I really always try to acknowledge that, let him know that I saw that. I see you doing this. I see this happening. You're being a great older brother. Thank you, because it's so easy to be like, Gus, knock it off. Gus, hey, listen, she doesn't understand this. Gus, she's just trying to get your attention, and then it's just like he feels like you're just hammering him and he's not doing anything right. And I'm protecting Margot. And so she's the one that I care more about. And it gets really tricky in that dynamic. And um, so that's why I try to use logic with him and more rational and logic things like just saying, hey, brain development and fantasy brain, or, give an example when he was that age and something I, went through with him. Um, but he does struggle with like the irritation sometimes of having the younger sister to um then seeing what it is I'm talking about and really modeling that for her. And she interestingly is like just getting old enough to where I can start like being a little bit more Margot. Now, this is Gus's. This is something that he got for a present. You have your presents, he has his presents. You need to be able to ask for permission. So she's just getting into that space now where I can start introducing those ideas to her as far as like, what's fair and not. What breaks my heart is when she sees Gus doing an art assignment or something like that, and she looks at that and she sees what she's drawing and she thinks what she's drawing is horrible. This is horrible. This is so bad. This is dumb. I'm dumb, and she starts talking about, that self, and it's like, oh my goodness, that she's you no, no, this is great. What you're drawing is great. This Gus is he's older, but that doesn't compute. Him
Mhm.
being older, it's just like maybe she can kind of like, yeah, he's bigger, but like, why can't I draw like he can draw? So
Gosh.
that's where you know, it's almost like she needs to have her own special thing that she does that, is just hers and hers alone that she does that we can recognize and and give her positive feedback about. But yeah, it's wild because they're 6 years apart and it's just enough to where, um, you're parenting. I mean, every kid's different, but then we have 2 different kids and then in 2 different stages of development, which is kinda wild. It's a bit of a juggling act sometimes.
As you were saying that, you had, said to Gus, "Hey, she just wants your attention. That's why she's reaching for that toy or that thing or whatever. It's why but maybe she's in addition to the wanting your attention, she's also trying to make sense of the world." Like, think about that's what we're all doing, by the way. We're sense-making machines inherently, and story, I would bet you would agree with this. Story is so useful to convey information through story because it helps people make sense of information. In fact, that's our duty as leaders, as communicators. It actually shouldn't be on our listener to make sense of the message, even though it might be prudent for them to actually take some of that responsibility and not just, either get it or not get it. There should be a little exchange, but it is our duty as deliverers of information to make it meaningful, relevant, useful, and um, so that's like the timeless human thing. We're sense making machines. And then imagine
Right.
you're not very good at it yet, or you're just in the beginning of the sense making, you know, process as a 5-year-old, and then you're evolving your sense making and meeting each of our kiddos wherever they're at in that sense making journey is critical. And I just think about what it means to be aware as a human that you're a sense making creature,
Right.
and part of part of that is to actually understand yourself and like get a handle on who you are. And I know people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s still working on figuring out who they are. So
Right.
to
Right.
expect a 5-year-old to have made sense of everything, or an 11-year-old, it's like that's just obviously not realistic. And I kind of you want to use this perhaps as a bridge to hear a little bit about your journey, Mike, as a sense making machine,
Mhm.
uncovering a little bit about your own self as a human being, and some things that tie to the podcast that you're working on,
Right.
and then how that's impacted maybe how you parent, or it helped you make sense of historically how you parented, and maybe now some adjustments you've made. But even as an adult, a handsome 50-something-year-old adult, you're trying to sort out things. What have you
Oh, for sure.
realized about yourself clinically and just generally over the last recent years that is worth telling the audience about?
Yeah. Thank you for setting that up because it's a pretty profound um kind of shift that I've been experiencing, I'd say, in the last 10 years, as far as just knowing, not only knowing who I am, but why I behave in different ways. And about 8, 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with adult ADHD. I mean, it's funny. I was just diagnosed with ADHD. I've always had it, but once I was diagnosed, it was like so much made sense to me. Up until that point, I'm in my early 40s and get this diagnosis. And up until that point, I was like, my brain just works a little differently, or I get fired up about certain things, and certain things I'm just, I can't really pay attention to for very long. Or, um, you know, why was it so important for me to be a performer? And with ADHD, I mean, I'm sure your audience is, you hear it. It's kind of become more and more common to hear about ADHD and what it is. You see a lot of funny memes about just like lacking attention or impulsivity, things like that. But that's ADHD. It's kind of like if you think about like a when you're at a music concert and you see all those different levels, the person at the board is playing with those different levels for the different instruments and stuff. It's like with the ADHD brain, everything is up at a 10. So everything is vying for your attention. Like it's like, oh, I'm hearing something out here now and I'm noticing something over here. It's like we can't bring something down a notch so you can focus more on the person who's speaking or the thing that you're watching or what you're supposed to be paying attention to. And so there's um it can be it can be kind of taxing, and you can get depleted quickly. Like the working memory is working extra hard. So things aren't as sticky. You need more reps to for something to be sticky and understandable. So it almost feels like you're always a little bit behind. It's like I need to just one more touch point on that and then I'll have it. And so you're always in this kind of a catch up. I'm catching up. And so there's always something that like needs to be done. And then if you live in that space for decades, sometimes it's hard just to relax and just to be in the present moment. It's like, okay, I'm in the present moment, but I still got to do these things that I need to catch up on. So being able to just truly relax and be present and be just in a calm and fulfilled state was hard for me, and I couldn't relax. I'd have to always be moving around or, addressing things. And being an older dad, I'm like, I'm going to miss this if I don't just learn how to be present to my kids, to prioritize that. Like this to-do list that I had, the ADHD to-do list is long and just gets longer. I mean, it's not pragmatic. It's unreason, it's like you have to learn how to just like, this is no longer going to impact me as I'm not going to have the same sense of urgency for this because I want to stay present to this. And it's like getting I wouldn't really have known to do that. I wouldn't have known how to do that as effectively if I didn't get the diagnosis. Another thing with ADHD is just the emotionality of it. There's there are we're quick to get excited about something. We're quick to get bummed out about something. We're quick to beat ourselves up about something. We're quick to celebrate something. So it's this wild ride. And when your kids need a little bit more of a kind of a stable emotional influence, if they see you not coping well with stress, they're going to get stressed because you're supposed to be their anchor. You're supposed to be their rudder. Um, so it was really out of necessity to learn how to do that better as well, just to be like, hey, let's learn how to check our emotionality a little bit here and hold space for my kid who's having a problem. If Margot is crying or melting down and gets her, there's a surge that goes through me, and I'll get emotional about it, and I'll, kind of take on that energy. And it's like learning about ADHD allows me to like, okay, this is what's happening to my body and my emotional state, my nervous system. Here are some tools to kind of like make an adjustment and then be present for my kid in a different way. It's not helpful if both of us are all worked up, So it's been a challenge as far as like um incorporating these tools, but it's over time it's happened, so I'm much better at um at just kind of showing up in a better way, taking care of myself. Um, you know, getting sleep, eating well, all the stuff that's like, that's boring. I was always a night owl just because it's like, yeah, there's still stuff like on TV or stuff to go out and do or whatever. It's like, I've learned to just kind of take care of myself a little better so I can show up in a better way. Whereas like if I before the diagnosis or if I were younger, I think that would have been tougher. So I think being an older dad and just having the diagnosis makes me a better dad overall.
Yeah, it appears you've reoriented yourself with kind of who you are, and getting. I suppose you've always had ADHD, yeah?
Yeah.
Or and by the way, ADHD. What does the acronym stand for?
Well, it is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Okay, that
And
H.
it presents differently for individuals. Sometimes the hyperactivity is more prominent. Sometimes there's more of an emotional component that's more prominent, and it presents differently in males and females. So it's a really tricky one, and it's one that if you've been around an ADHD, a lot of stand-up comics are ADHD. A lot of you know, entrepreneurs are ADHD. So we're fun to be around, but we're also like can be kind of emotional and just, we can get irritated easily or frustrated easily, and that's not a picnic for your spouse, or for your kids. So I think a lot of people discover they have ADHD once they get married or, once they start some couples counseling, you know, You're like, "Oh, okay."
Well, I'm also
Yes.
recognizing like with think about the nature of our world these days, where, and I say this when I'm coaching people to tell a great story is like attention is a currency and you have to spend it wisely. If people feel like their attention has been wasted, or they're not getting their own ROI on how they spent their attention, you're losing uh, their customer, you're losing a customer or their loyalty to you, or you're losing
Right.
their attention. And, so think of attention as a currency. And right now, everyone is trying to spend your attention. And there's a lot of stuff that is enticing, and a lot of ways that you can be enticed as a human being. And I wonder how do we guide our kids, because I can see the level of this pressure, and even maybe there's some chemical, biological stuff taking place that leads us to having ADHD for those who have it. It's like, how do we, I mean, part of it's just an explicit conversation about this thing called attention and to spend it wisely to with our kiddos. But it's funny, we always say, pay attention. We tell them just like they know what that even means. Pay attention to this. Pay attention. There's a cars coming. It's like, if you really, that's the right wordage. It's like, you're spending something, you don't get it back in the moment. It's like, right, you can renew it, but you are spending it. There is a cost to it. You want to get a benefit out of it, right? And if you're actually wasting it for too long, it can be exhausting. It can
Right.
drain you. It can deplete you. So I suppose one thing comes to mind is, how do we actually guide and steward our kiddos to spend their attention wisely in our current environment where there's a lot of pressure on their attention? And then maybe the second question that comes to mind is like, what adjustments have you made? I guess that shift in mentality, awareness of it has afforded you a shift. How has that affected how you're parenting? What are you doing differently
Mhm.
for yourself to be a good dad, or perhaps how you interact with your kiddos? But start with, how do we guide our kids to spend their attention, to treat attention thoughtfully and not get caught up in this world we're living in?
Well, yeah, I mean, because they are sponges and they're, like I was saying earlier, they're seeing a lot of things for the first time or experiencing a lot of things for the first time. So, um, but with Gus will, so this will be, no two kids are exactly the same. Gus will say, if nothing is happening, he will say, I'm bored. I'm bored, and he'll go grab his laptop. And I'm like, buddy, um, so we work this system out where his laptop is kind of like a library book. He has to check it out and check it back in because I mean, the way he plays Roblox, which is a video game that seems okay. This is where I'll spin out sometimes. I'll be like, we'll get on Common Sense Media and just like, let me just at least get some information or, just try to like be a responsible parent here. And, of course, he's already asking for the phone, and so, like, the screens and the technology is a big thing as far as where he wants to put his attention. Um, and where I am now with him is, listen, this is like a moderation thing, like, it's okay to have a treat, but if you live on treats, eventually you're gonna get sick. You're gonna, develop some, some bad stuff. So, like, this in and of itself is not bad, but, anything out of proportion can, over time, be bad, and I'm not sure, Dave, what he is really pulling from that. Like, sometimes I'll catch myself in kind of, like, lecture mode or like The Incredibles, where I was like, "You caught me monologuing," like the villain. Monologuing, and it's just like, "Gus, I know I'm doing this. I can't stop it. I can't stop myself. Hang in there. I'm almost done." I'll even call it out. I was like, "I know I just talked for a little while there, buddy, but, I don't know how else to do this right now." But I'll try to, like, have him, like, we listened to a podcast about, like, screens and media, and just so he could hear from somebody else, maybe something like where he could look at it a little more objectively. Because it's like my dad was over last weekend and he's telling me, here's what I should do. And I'm like, I'm having the reaction of like, I got it. I got
Yeah.
it, dad.
I'm working on it.
Like, so, um,
Yeah.
but so with him, as far as like the attention thing, it's really like, I'm working right now. The approach is like trying to kind of explain the concept of moderation, input and output. Right now you've had a lot of input. Let's get some output going. Like whether that's outside playing, whether that's a creative endeavor, writing, you know, doing an art project, something like that, where it's an output, and just trying to kind of see what might resonate. I think with improv, like you're trying different things out, and what works one day might not work the next day. And so you're constantly kind of reinventing or kind of shifting how you're approaching something, and that's one of the thing that's a little taxing with parenting. With Margot and the attention, she's trying to put together this little this little hair thing with these clips that go on, and it's like, this is kinda hard for me to even figure out, and this poor little 5-year-old's trying to put together this little headband with these little animal ears on them with that are fuzzy, and you stick things on there, and she wants to just start doing it, and I'm like, and I'll Margot, let's look at how they're telling us to do it here. Let's look at, because I'm trying to figure out too. And what they're so immersed in the thing that they're doing or paying attention to. I think a lot of times when you say their name, they're not really hearing it. Or if they're hearing it, it's not, something in them is not saying, "Oh, we need to respond." Because where their attention to is so magnetic that expecting them to be like, "Hey, Gus," for him to respond immediately to me, to
Mm.
expect that, that's on me. I mean, I can't expect that necessarily. I can't get frustrated if he's not like, because of just this attention that you're talking about. So what I've what I find effective for me is I have to go up and kind of just, I'll have to this, and I don't always do it because I'll get frustrated a lot, but it's just like, standing in front of them, being calm, and then like, "Hey, buddy," like a calm tone will get response better than, "Gus, hey, Gus, Gus," like if you're, or just a touch on the shoulder. Hey, give them a second to be like, to pull out of what they're doing and then look at you and reorient and then take in more information, or new information, and respond. And I that's an ADHD thing that because we ADHDers a lot of times have what's called hyperfocus, where we will be so intensely focused and invested on something. If someone comes in and disrupts that, it's actually unsettling. It's like, okay, hold on. I have to unplug from this and then listen to you. And then I have to go back to this and then like figure out where I was again. So it can be kind of an unsettling, like irritating type thing to like get to have interruptions while you're hyper focused as an ADHDer. And I imagine it's the same thing for kids. They're like so attentive to like unplug that and expect an immediate response. It's really, I think, pretty unrealistic. It's like giving them that, because as a parent, we get impatient. We're like, come on, it's dinner time, or we gotta go, or turn the TV off. It's time to do something else. That transition time is real. You need to try to put those buffers in where you like, you know, touch on the shoulder, a tone type thing to get them out of what they're attending, where their attention is, and helping them kind of guide them to a new thing.
Gosh, I'm just thinking about as a parent, now that you've said all this, it's that our awareness of and our understanding of the nature of attention and the relationship to attention for our kiddos. It's like being just attuned to that, mindful of it. Because you're kind of trying to snap them out of making sense of the world and having fun and using their imagination. You need them to come over here and be more practical, but a 5-year-old's definitely not aware of their attention. They're just using it. And then now you're working with Gus on being a little bit more aware of his attention. And it's almost like this massive responsibility of ours as parents to guide our kiddos to spend their attention wisely in their life, to take agency of it, to be stewards of it, to recognize it's a currency and you deserve value in return. If you're going to spend it wisely, you want value in return. And just that as an endeavor, as a challenge for us as parents to set them up for success in the realm of attention, thinking about the world they're coming into. And then knowing that on a certain level, there are people who, even if you give them the best heads up on how attention works, there's still certain folks that are going to be faced with ADHD, and it's going to be something that's a little bit more cumbersome and complex for them to
Right.
solve. So,
Well, and think about another thing to add on to that, Dave, is like, just be mindful of like typically when a parent wants a child to stop doing something and do something else, the something else is 9 times out of 10 not going to be as intrinsically motivating to the kid. It's not going to be something the kid's going to want to do. It's not going to
true.
be as exciting as what they're currently doing.
Right.
And that 20 times a day starts to add up. And so that kind of learning, doing expecting some sort of thing. I mean, you have to I think get creative. You have to just get creative in how you vie for your kids' attention, or how you frame something up as far as what they're paying attention to where you want them to go next. It's like the 5-year-old is always like, "Why do we have to brush teeth every night?" Like it's this intense burden, this brushing of the teeth every night, just like she's just
So funny.
it's so funny.
You're
It's
like,
like, come
for
on.
the rest of my life, you're telling me twice
Right.
a
Right.
for
Right.
the rest of my life.
Yes.
Have you heard the
It's like,
parable of the horse and the farmer, or the farmer and the horse? Where, because if you, I'll read it off to you a little bit, but it's like, I think the mindset of a parent to kind of get into a place where you can go with the flow, and to be able to do that when you happen to have ADHD, or you're just, you're overwhelmed with all of life's possibilities, is tough to do. But I just feel like being a little bit detached from outcomes, a little bit easygoing, seeing that we're in a scene with each of our kiddos at all times, and we get to either dance with them and improv with them, or there can be rigid, conflict and stiff arm. It's going to yield a particular experience. And what are we trying to actually create? And the parable of the farmer and the horse is kind of, I'll keep it short, but you can Google it, and it's like the this son, I think the son brings home a horse, and it's like, oh, how lucky that your son found a horse somehow and brings it home. And the farmer's like, well, maybe that's lucky. And then the horse runs away, and so the like, oh, that sucks. That's too bad. Hopefully, hopefully it works out. You can find the horse. He's like, well, maybe it sucks. He's kind of in this maybe attitude about all these different things. And at one point, the kid has to go out and find the horse, and so his son has run off. And how awful is that? Some people say to him. He's like, well, maybe. And then there's this aspect of the story where uh, the military approaches the village and rounds up all these kiddos to go off to war or something, but the farmer's son is gone. And so now there's like this added benefit. So you just really never know. You kind of have to go with the flow, as this parable showcases, you never really know the impact that an experience or an event is going to have. And you have to stay gracefully neutral at all times. It sounds beautiful and poetic. I like the concept, but I recognize that there's the reality of all these pressures on us as individuals, our kiddos and their attention, and navigating it all is the task and the art of the ultimate role, which is fatherhood in my mind, or parenthood. We happen to be narrowing in on fatherhood together.
Absolutely. No, Dave, I love that parable, and I think it's really, what I've heard, like, there's a term, yeah, I mean, that's maybe, like, being fixated on a certain the way something should be, and then letting that affect how we react versus, like, as you were saying, keeping an open mind or a fluid adaptation. That's one of the big things for me, just it's all fluid, adapting. Like, how are you adapting? The more rigid I think you are with how you think should go and how you approach the whole thing, the more frustrating it's going to be. The more you can kind of like keep your perspective wide and kind of explore just with your scene partner, letting the scene unfold and being present in that moment, um, is huge. And I think another thing that I'll just kind of say is for the dads, don't be too hard on yourself. Practice some self-compassion. It's hard. Um, I know Dave, you said like the lead, let's shape and mold some future leaders. I think that's absolutely right. Um, I think that's a beautiful goal. Um, and I think that, to get there and to like just one real snippet, like Margot, I'm painting the exterior of our house. And there was a time where my perfectionist would have been driving the bus and just wanted it to look perfect because I probably was, you know, what are people going to think of how good I did on this? Um, when I look at this, am I going to be annoyed if it's not perfect? And just, it's really wrapped up in like, not an insecurity, honestly. And as you kind of become just more, let things flow a little bit more and just kind of understand that, you know, fluid adaptation, you kind of loosen that perfectionism thing, which doesn't necessarily serve you. Margot comes out and is like, "Can I help paint?"
Mhm.
And I've got the roller and it's loaded with paint. I'm like, "Sure." And she's rolling away and I'm watching the joy on her face. And I could care less if like she made a big smudge or something, because to me that experience becomes perfect. It's like It's like that's what perfection is, watching your child and the joy on their face doing something. And if I went back and looked at that and it had Margot's kind of smudge mark on it, I couldn't have asked for anything better. It's just like that to me is like that's art that re- that that's a symbol of this experience. And so to not get hung up on, did I do this right? It's my daughter coming out and wanting to be part of an experience and not really caring if, like, if it's done. Of course, it's done perfectly because she was there doing it with me.
Totally. And you've done the work and paid attention to yourself and learned and got to a point where you could see that moment for what it really was all about. Um, despite some challenges that maybe you've carried around with you for a while with ADHD and so forth. And I just love the
Big
reframe
time.
and the shift. Mike, can you give me 3 or 4 more minutes after this? I'm going to
Sure.
have my
Yeah.
kiddo and then I'll edit out this moment right here. But I want to just
Yeah.
ask you the final question and hear your answer.
Yeah, please.
Cool.
Yeah.
So give me 1 second, Mike.
Yep.
Right here.
You ready to meet Leo?
Hi,
That's
buddy.
Michael.
Hi,
Hi,
big
Michael.
guy. You had quite a journey coming into the world. Oh my gosh. You're an
Cool.
amazing little kid already.
Let's see. Let me ask the question. You answer it, and then
Yeah.
let's just hang together for another moment or two.
Okay.
Now that I have him, I can hang as long, but I know you got to go. So,
Okay.
um, so Mike, last big grand question to wrap us up, and I feel like we could keep going with so many different directions with and things that as I'm holding my little one, I have more questions for you, good man, but we'll save that for another time. I just want you to picture into the future a time when Margot and Gus, they're sitting around reminiscing about their father. And think of them sitting around a campfire, just to give a nod to the essence of these fireside chats we're having. And they're celebrating you and telling a story of the 3 things they remember most about you. And they described, dad was A, he was B, and he was C. And what do you hope to be known for in a faraway land where your kids are our age and beyond, and they're reminiscing about the path and the journey that you took them on? What would you say those 3 key characteristics and stories are?
That's a great question. I think it's so great to think about. I really feel like I hope they talk about how I engaged with them, even if it was in a dad way or a goofy way or not the right way. Just I was present and engaged and joined in on it. I wasn't just an observer. I was part of it. Um, I think I also want them to. I hope they would talk about how they felt my uh how proud I was to be a dad, how much I valued being a dad, how much I loved being a dad. I hope that is something that they can talk about. And then I also hope that they can laugh about what just like the dad things that I did that were just like, remember when dad yelled at us for this? Remember when dad like, tried to, fix the plumbing by himself and, it ended up taking, 3 days to, and to call a plumber. Those types of things where it's just like, you know, it's almost like a roast, cuz I just I want them to know that I loved them and that I cared about being a dad and was involved with them, but also like they could just kind of see me as, they can have a laugh at it as well.
Yeah, gracefully fallible and a man of character, but a character of a man.
You put it really nicely there, Dave. Thank you.
Well, you're a good man in my eyes and their eyes, no doubt. And it's been an honor chatting with. That's Mike Collins for everybody listening and watching. It's been an honor hanging with you, my friend.
You as well.
Thanks for
My
pouring your heart out. I got like
my pleasure.
25 other questions. I know I want to ask you on a second convo here soon, but um,
Love it.
and I just want to acknowledge, like I just had Leo here, who's making his debut on the pod at 43. Let's see, I was 43 when I had him. You had Gus when you were 43, 44.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
the vantage almost, it is an absolute gift to have a kiddo, later in life where you have more sorted out than you realize you
That's
did.
right.
And it's a forcing function, in a way, no matter when you have them. But I think everything is coalesced for me to get, it's forced me to have a lot more clarity and to be more focused on certain priorities. And it's almost, I don't know. You can't change it. Yeah, so it's like, it's not like you can go back in time and have kids
Right.
younger.
Right.
But for me, it's like it came when it absolutely should have. And the good fortune is, I have a lot of friends who I get a call upon, including you, to say, what's been the experience? What would you do differently? Who have you
Yeah.
become as a father? And just so fun to hear your story and to put it out into the world. Oh, thank you,
Oh,
mister.
that was so precious. Oh my God. That's
Well, he's walking, he's almost talking, and I'll have to get you to meet him soon.
absolutely. I'm
All
glad
right,
to
my
meet him
friend.
virtually here.
Michael, thanks again. And we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.
There you have it. That's been another episode of Whoa Dad, Go Dad. If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button, subscribe to the podcast so you get the future ones, and please spread the word and post this episode to your social networks. That's powerful. Perhaps the best thing you can do is share this directly with a new dad or a soon-to-be dad that you know personally. Let them know you're rooting them on. And indeed, drop a comment and be really a part of this dialogue on fatherhood with me. Let me know in the comments a question you want me to ask other dads, or just some feedback. How does this sound to you? What's helpful? What stands out about these conversations? I would appreciate that intel as I grow Whoa Dad, Go Dad. I've got many more episodes to come, and I'm so glad you're here. Looking forward to catching you on the next one.
Whoa, Dad, here we go now. Oh yeah, the ultimate roll now. Oh yeah, here we go now. Whoa, Dad, go.